There are several different ways that we can apply binding to our finished quilt. One of them involves bringing the backing fabric towards the front of the quilt and then stitching it in place on the front of the quilt. When we're doing that, we're creating a mitered corner in our binding, which can be a little bit challenging to get that angle exact. The quick and easy Mitered-Binding Tool makes this process so easy and so simple. I'm one of those people who have always dreaded doing bindings where I'm bringing the back fabric to the front because I can never get those corners to look exactly right. 3 of my corners always come out perfect, but one of them never does, and it always bothers me. By using the quick and easy Mitered-Binding Tool, it will allow perfect success on all of your corners each and every time. Let me show you how easy this is to use. After we've finished quilting our quilt together, we have our backing layer, our batting, and then our quilt top. And our first step is to trim the batting even with the edge of the quilt top. And to do this, I just use scissors and cut right along the edge, being extremely careful not to cut through my backing fabric. By lifting the batting up, it helps me ensure that I can get a nice even cut. After we have the batting removed, our next step is going to be trimming the backing fabric to the appropriate size. I've decided to use a 3/4 inch finished binding on this table runner, so I'm going to want to trim my backing fabric to twice that amount, twice 3/4 of an inch, which is going to be 1 1/2 inches. Using my cutting grid, I'm going to line up 1 1/2 inches right on the edge of the quilt top. And then we're going to trim this away. If you wanted to use a thinner binding, such as a 1/2 inch finished, then you would trim to 1 inch. So that would be twice your 1/2 inch finish measurement of 1 inch. The next step is going to be to press this in place. And we're going to fold up our 3/4 inch just so the edge of our backing fabric meets the edge of our quilt top. And we're going to press that in place so that we've got a nice crease that we can work with as we're using the Mitered-Binding Tool. And we're going to want to do this to all 4 sides of our quilt. After we have all 4 sides pressed up so that we've got a nice crease showing where our 3/4 of an inch measurement is, next we're going to take the quick and easy Mitered-Binding Tool and position it at the corner of the table runner. And we're going to use the guidelines here to square it up, and then simply mark this line right along the edge of the tool. And what we're doing is creating an angle here. I'm using a water-soluble marker for this, so that way I can wash the quilt later and these marks will come out. The next step that we want to do is to mark this intersection right here, which is going to be where our fold is with the angle. And we're going to want to do that on all 4 sides of our quilt. The next step involves actually creating this angle and mitering the binding. And what we're going to do is fold it in reverse. And you may have to twist your quilt top around a little bit, just whatever works well for you in order to get this angle lined up here. And taking a pin, I'm going to insert right into that intersection point between the folded crease and the angle. And I'm going to come through on the other side and pin straight through that exact same point. And then bring those together and place a pin there. Placing another pin at our corner and working that just a little bit so that we can get the outer edge lined up exactly even. Our next step is going to be sewing, and we're going to sew just from the edge of the table runner out to this intersection point so that we've stitched this part of our binding in place. As we're ready to sew, I have this positioned underneath my presser foot so that when I drop my needle, it lines up exactly with the corner of the table runner. And we're going to stitch a straight line coming out and stopping right here where I have the pin, which is where I have a line marked where the pressed fold was, as it intersects with the line that we drew from the Mitered-Binding Tool. And we want to stop right on that point, and I'm going to do just a couple back stitches to secure. As you can see, we've got a line of stitching from right here at the corner out to this intersection point. Our next step is to trim this, and using our scissors, we're going to trim approximately 1/4 inch away, and then we're also going to snip back towards this tip. After we've sewn this, our next step is to flip it to the front. As we bring this forward, we want to make sure that our point works out, and you can either use a point turning tool or a pin just to press and pull that little point out. Then we're going to fold this forward, and I like to go ahead and put a few pins in just to hold it. As you can see, the pressed fold line is what we're now using as our edge. And we're going to repeat this process for all 4 corners on our table runner. Once we have this positioned in place, I like to take my iron and repress it. That really helps secure and bring the binding up towards the front. And we're going to continue this working all the way around the edges of our table runner. On the long straight edges, I don't have to put quite as many pins. After we have turned all of our corners, pinned and pressed them into place, the final step to finish your binding will be either to use a machine finish and do a small zigzag right here as a top stitch, or to stitch by hand. And that choice is yours. Sometimes, depending on its function, I'll use a hand stitch just so I have a really neat and clean finish to it. Other times I'll use a decorative machine stitch just to add a little bit more interest to the top of the table runner. I hope you have as much fun working with the quick and easy Mitered-Binding Tool as I did. It's given me a lot more confidence to do bindings in this style, where I'm bringing the backing forward to the front of the quilt so that I know that I'll have perfect mitered corners on all 4 edges of my quilt.